Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to watch my talk. Uh, it's great to be here at Rails World to give you this talk. My name is Rafael França. You can find me at Twitter, X, and GitHub at Rafael Franca. I'm naturally from Brazil, and more specifically from the state of Sergipe, that little state in red, the smallest one in Brazil, right in the coast, a sunny, warm, tropical paradise. But now I live in Canada. So you can imagine how different it is to me, especially in the winter. I'm a member of the Rails Core team since 2012. For those who don't know this, is the team responsible for developing and defining the direction of the framework. It's not a single guy. Since 2014, I keep the first position in the list of all-time contributors of the framework. Thank you. I'm also the person who released Rails 8 today during a keynote. And I work at Shopify. I don't know if you know this company. It's our city host here. At Shopify, I'm a principal developer in the Ruby on Rails infrastructure team. A team that I helped to create, and where I'm responsible for setting the direction of Ruby and Rails inside the company. You might know this team because we created a few projects lately, like Widget, the new Ruby parser, the Ruby LSP, and many other contributions to the Rails framework and the entire ecosystem. But now enough about me, and we are here to talk about Rails. Rails has a very defined doctrine. It's a collection of pillars defined by David that drives Rails since the first version. Some of those pillars are things that the community are really proud of. For the purpose of this talk, I will focus on a few of those pillars. First, we're proud ourselves that Rails is optimized for programming happiness, not for machines. Work with Rails often brings us joy. Convention of configuration means that you focus your time on writing your code. No need to configure different libraries to work together. The menu is omakase. This is because Rails has made a lot of choices for you. So you can just focus on what's important for your application. And Rails takes care of make sure that those choices work together. Those four pillars are what attracted me to Rails, and it's the main reason why I'm still around. And Rails is actually very good at those four pillars, right? Let's put ourselves in the minds of a beginner. We want to create our new Rails application, like we heard today, from Hello World to IPO. We get to the Rails website, start reading the Rails guides, and we want to create this application. In the guide, we learn that we need to run Rails new. But a section before that is telling me that I need to install Ruby. How to install Ruby? I mean, it should be easy, right? I just need to find the proper way to install Ruby in my operational system. Let's say I'm a Linux user because I heard that the creator of Rails has a newfound passion for Linux. And his setup is amazing. I want to be like that. So I'm already familiar with Linux. I know how to use it. I use Ubuntu. And install packages is just a matter of running apt install. So I apt install Ruby. But wait a second. Which version of Ruby? Latest Ubuntu install Ruby 3.2. But I heard that the new version is 3.3. So how do you install a different version of the one that comes with my operational system? So search around, I find information about a thing called version managers, RBM, chruby, RVM, ESDF. It's a letter soup. And I really getting confused. Which one should I pick? How many of you use chruby? Raise your hands. A few? How about RBM? A lot. RVM, is still anyone using that? No? ESDF? Okay, a lot. And how about MIS? Hey, that's so little. Okay, I'm going with the majority. I use RBM. Ruby is all installed. I can finally create my application after, I don't know, a few hours. And I'm going to trust the chef's choice and just create a Rails application with what's provided to me. I run Rails new, but the chef chooses SQLite. It's a great database, but I already know how to use MySQL. I've been using MySQL for years with PHP, so I don't want to learn a new language and a new database at the same time. So I delete my app and search online, find that to create a Rails application with MySQL, you need a flag. I pass the flag, and I generate a new app. Oops, bund install fail. I don't know why. Something about a gen not being able to install. It seems the system is missing some packages. But which one? I search around, I read the backtrace. I learned that it's related to the MySQL thing that I just changed. I need a library to be able to install the MySQL client. So I apt-get that library with the huge name that I'm not going to say. Everything works now. MySQL is properly configured. I can happily build my app after a few hours of trying to create my first application. After some time, our little app is now a business. And while I could be working alone with it because it's one-person framework, I need a new team member. I tell my new team member to clone the application. And now they need to set up it in the same way that I did. But again, it's a few months. I don't remember anymore what I do. So we are back to the same thing. How do I install Ruby? I used a version manager last time, but this time, my friend is on macOS. How do I install RPM for macOS? I search around, I learn about Homebrew. I use Homebrew to install RBM, and I can now install Ruby again. Fine, great. I run bund install. What happens? It fails again. And why it fails is, again, the same problem. The MySQL client package is missing. I know the name of the MySQL client package, so I reinstall that package just to learn that that package doesn't exist in this OS. It's just called MySQL. So again, I need to find out, and finally, I can run the test. My test fails because I forgot that now I'm using Redis. It's probably the wrong choice, but I choose it anyway. And I forgot about it. So I have to install Redis, and finally, the application is working in another person's machine. I can take notes for the next person so they don't have the same problem. And we can finally work in our product. So you are going to be the judge now. How good we are in those 4 pillars, if you look at this. Right? Like we just learned that Rails is to bring your application from Hello World to IPO. But how do you get to the Hello World anyway? I'm pretty sure that like many of you had similar experience. My humble opinion is that while we are good on those 4 pillars after you have application, we are not doing enough. We need to do more. And that's what I'm here to talk about. Like, what are the frontiers of developer productivity in the framework we love? What should else be doing? Most of the things I talk about is about environment setup. Like how you improve and how you set up your machine to be able to develop your programs. Is everything before working the application itself? Some applications require the minimum. You can just install Ruby, it's fine. You do not need MySQL clients, etc. But many others have very complex systems that require a few other dependencies. And there are many ways to solve this problem. I'm going to talk about a few of them from the first that I heard about and the last one. So the first one, like, is excluding many bash scripts that people create to set up your computers. We had a project, we still have a project called Vagrant. That's a way to automate the creation of virtual machines to be used for development. This is what a Vagrant file looks like. The language used to configure Vagrant should be familiar to us because it's just Ruby. A Vagrant file defines what operational system that VM is going to use, what type of network is going to use, what are the ports that we want to forward to our host operational system, what the provider, in this case VirtualBox, how much memory, how many CPUs, and you can also use a shell script to install all the dependencies you want. Vagrant is great because it's reusable. You can just get this thing, that file, and share with your colleagues, and they should be able to use it as well. The environment is disposable. If anything fails, you can just delete the VM and create again. And it's repeatable. You should always get the same results given the same input. But it's based on the virtual machines, so it's heavy, and you have to sync the data between the host machine, the one you are using to developer, and the virtual machine. That's really, really slow. Boxing was another solution for the same problem that was created years ago by GitHub that I personally tried to use. It was a macOS-specific provisional project that used a series of Puppet modules to manage the development environment. I'm not going to bore you about the details of how this works. But suffice to say that it was a very complex system with their own DSL. Full disclaimer, I was one of the maintainers of Boxing. At the time, I thought that maintaining Rails was not enough of a full-time job, and I still had a consultant's job to do. And I need some, I don't know, things in my life, so I decided to maintain a very complex open source project. That was not one of my brightest ideas ever. But Boxing was local, since you could run this in your operational system. It was reusable in the same way that Vagrant was. I could share with my friends, and they would get the same results. But it was not repeatable, since it would depend on the current state of your machine. If you had MySQL already, you run Box, you install MySQL. Sometimes it works, sometimes it will fail. It depends on what you had in your machine. It was macOS specific, so I could not use on Linux, neither on Windows. And it was very complex, because it used Puppet. With the advent of containers, people start to use Docker as a way to set up the development environment. To illustrate this kind of setup, let's get the Rails contributors application. That's an open source application that we actually use this setup. This app is the one that showed that list of Rails contributors that I showed in the first slides. So the app defines a Docker Compose configuration like this, with two services defining the application and the database. In the application, you define something like where the application is mounted, and you would also set up where the database is found. And in the Docker file, you would be listing the Ruby image, like I'm using Ruby 3.3.4, all the packages I need to install to be able to develop this application, packages that, for example, was related to my setup because I use Vim, and others that was related to the application itself, like the push list client. So things were mixed. Then I would just run commands like installing or upgrading Ruby.js and installing Ruby. This image shows how this works. Like you have two boxes. One is your host OS, your machine. The other one is the container. You would have like the database in the container and the application running there. But your editor, your browser, and the files are in your computer, local to your computer. And you would need to send explicit commands to the container. So you could not run Rails server because Rails is not running your machine. You would have to send a docker exec command to be able to run Rails in that container. If you pay attention to Rails, we released a few years ago, I think 2 years ago, a similar idea called Dockerd that was a way to run Rails application inside Docker containers. As any of those approaches, this Docker environment had the advantage and disadvantages. Like it's reusable, disposable, repeatable, like the Vagrant setup, but the abstraction leaks. You need to know about Docker. You cannot run just your commands you are used to. You need to know that you need to talk with a container to run the commands you are used to. And you also had that data synchronization that could make your environment completely slow. Like a Git status could take seconds because you're synchronizing files between containers in the host OS. The latest solution for this problem is Omakube. Like Boxing is a suite of scripts to set up your Ubuntu machine. So the advantages are the same as Boxing. Omakube runs everything in the host OS, is reusable, you can share with colleagues, but it's not repeatable. If you already have a machine set up, in order to make Omakube work, you need to reinstall your OS. If you mess something out and you want to reset to a working state, you also need to format the OS. And it's Linux specific. Ubuntu specific even. Although Omakube is the newest one, in Rails 7.2, Andrew and I work in a feature called Develop Containers for Rails. But wait a second, didn't I just talk about containers in Docker? Why we have a different topic for the same thing? Yes, that's true. But Develop Containers, or Dev Containers for short, is more than a Docker setup in the way we saw before. It's a specification released by Microsoft. It's supported by many tools like VS Code, RubyMine, and is even used to implement features like GitHub Codespace. Differently of the previous approach, you develop inside the container. So experience is the same as if you are running everything in the host OS. To understand how this works, let's get the same application, Rails contributors. So that app has a folder called dev container with 3 files inside, dev container JSON, Docker Compose, and a Docker file. In the dev container JSON, we define the name of the application, that we are using a compose file, which services we are using to develop, in this case the application, and a post create command, in this case the bin setup that people already are used to using a Rails application, and which features of this container we want inside it. In this case, I want a GitHub CLI so I can use the GitHub API. I want Node.js installed, and I want the PostgreSQL client. In the compose file, I define the application itself in the database, similar to the Docker example. But we point the application to the Docker file, and we pass which version of Ruby we want. The Docker file has a line to install Ruby. It installs some packages that we need to run this application. And I know I will need the Git repository inside the container. So I also clone the Rails repository so I can do the calculations and run my data. Let's see it in action. So I'm not going to play the entire video, but like we go to VS Code, we tell it to clone the Rails contributor application. I say it's a main branch. It starts to load the dev container. I open the logs. You can see what's happening. It's basically created a lot of containers. I'm not going to play that. But in less than 3 minutes, we are going to get a Rails application set up. And in this computer, I don't even have Ruby installed yet. So put this explanation in a diagram. A container is made of images. That is like, in our case, the Ruby image, and a few features, like the three I just show you, like connect to Postgres, the GitHub client, and Node. And some personalization, like I want my own things inside it. So in the personalization side, let's say I clone my dot files inside it, so I can have my Git aliases, all my bash scripts that I have, everything inside the container in the same way I have in my host OS. And the image itself is just a composition of many features. Like the Ruby image, the only thing that's there is a Ruby feature that installs Ruby in the right version. This architecture supports a very high level of customization because we can just create containers with a lot of Lego pieces and like have, I don't know, your own setup for your own application. So let's dive in one of the features, the Ruby feature I just talked about. Inside that feature, we have two files, a dev container feature JSON and install sh. Dev container feature just lists the ID of the feature, what customization it has. For example, this feature for VS Code is going to install the Ruby LSP extension. If you have a V, you would install anything else. I don't know, maybe the LSP plugin for V. It also sets the path, so it exposes an environment variable for you, so it knows where to find the RBM command, for example. And also, like, you can define dependencies, all the features you want to install with this one. In this case, I installed the common utils from dev containers. And I can define options that I can allow people to customize. In this case, you can customize the version. And inside the install sh is a bash script, I know, but don't worry, it's fine. This script is just install the packages we need to install Ruby. It knows about it. You don't need to know. The feature knows about it. For example, it knows that you need to install Rust to be able to compile with YGit enable. Did you know that? Maybe not. But like, this is tricky to find out. So it also clones RBM, install RBM in your bash, so you need to even think about it. And install the version of Ruby that you ask it, and also set it as a global. Oops, sorry. Oh no. Okay. And the other part that like I'm going to talk about is what this image is, right? I talk about the feature. The image, the Ruby image, is just a dev container JSON and a Docker file. In the dev container JSON, I define where the Docker file is found, what are all the features you need. In this case, common utils, I need Git as well, and I need the Ruby feature I want to install. And in our Docker file, I just install any base image. It could be a Ubuntu-based image, but in our case, it's a Debian-based image. If you pay attention, which I hope you are, because I'm going to ask you in the hall later, our Ruby image configuration is very similar to the dev container configuration we just created for our application. And that's by design. Dev containers are just images. These allow us to do things like, I don't know, build an image specific for our application, and instead of telling every single one of you to build the image in your machine, we can do that on CI and provide to you a already built image specific for your app that instead of taking 3 minutes or 5 or 10, whatever, is going to just take the time enough to download the image from the container environment. So maybe a few seconds. Okay, so how do I use this with Rails? If you have Rails 7.2, you can just create a new Rails application and pass a dev container flag. if you have an existing Rails application in 7.2 as well, you can run the Rails dev container command, and it's going to detect what you are using and generate the right dev container for you. But again, to run those commands, I need Ruby install. How do you install Ruby again? I mean, for nearly generate dev container config, if I use VS Code, you just need to install the dev container extension, and you can see all the commands the dev container has in the command palette. So you can open the current project in a dev container or clone the existing project repository. And one of the tips I have to give you is like, if you clone the repository inside the container volume, not in your machine, in the container volume, you're going to have operations way faster, because we are basically mimicking the setup that I was talking about, where if you clone your machine, you are going to have that sync that I talk about that's bad, is slow. You should not be doing that. But if you clone inside a container, you just have that same architecture that I talk about, where the client's on your host machine, the server is there, and we don't need to sync the files. So, like the Docker approach, the pros are the same. But what are the disadvantages? Editor setup, maybe. Because I bet you are thinking now, okay, cool, Rafael, I don't use VS Code. All the examples you gave is with VS Code. And since dev containers were created by Microsoft in VS Code as well, I bet it's only going to work with VS Code, right? Not really. Given it's an open spec, you can already use dev container with other editors. I have tried myself with a few of those: VS Code, IntelliJ, Vim, Emacs, and Cursor. Okay, but you need Docker, right? Also, not really. You can use with any container runtime. The ones that I tried myself were like Windows Subsystem, Colima, and ObStack. And how about the Rails new? I still need to install Ruby to generate a new application. And trying to solve this problem, we created a standalone executable that works in any operational system, even Windows, that creates a container to generate the application for you. This allows you to get a Rails application configured with a dev container that you can start in your favorite editor on the early stages. Like, I'm not comfortable with this tool yet, because I think we need to invest a little bit more in it, but it works. That's exactly why I'm giving this talk. Because I think we really should take seriously those 4 pillars of the doctrine, and we need to do more investment in this area. OMACUB and dev containers are solutions for this environment setup problem, but they are not even close to be the experience I want to give to people. The CLI requires JavaScript runtime, for example. So to run dev containers, you need Node. I don't like that idea. So I want the community to try to build a CLI that can be in any language like Rust that does not require JavaScript. Anything else we could be investing in this area? I think so. I think editor integration is one of the things I wish we were investing more as a community. We have the Ruby LSP and the Stimulus LSP right now, but we need to do better. Like, we need a better code understanding. We need timely information where it matters, not after running CI to know we have a syntax error in our Ruby program. Why should I wait for that? And since I'm already in the topic of talk about static analysis of code, we also, I think we need to talk seriously about static typing. And I know, sure, none of the incarnations of this for Ruby are good enough yet, but I love if we as a community could investigate what could be a great static type system for Ruby. We as a community should be pushing forward the frontiers of productivity further and further. After all, this is an area that we proud ourselves of being good at. I hope I was able to create a little bit of curiosity about the subject, and I hope to see what our community will create in this space. Thank you.